It's raining here in Doofy land. Perfect weather to make episode 19 of the Doofy Doo talk through of Shiren the Wanderer. Last episode we had gotten our first companion and we're going out on our first adventure. And once again, I have no herb of sight for the little girl. Seems to happen every time. I was also in the middle of talking about the importance of a game emphasizing liberation over empowerment to give you a real sense of control. And this is the key element in a game to really give me a satisfying sense that I am controlling what is actually going on in the game. Last episode I listed the verbs that we already encountered in Shiren, and I said that that was probably maybe a quarter of the total number of verbs that eventually we're going to have access to in the game, which is a ton. Now, some people could say that, hey, in the typical RPG, you actually have access to a lot of those verbs. You can slow down enemies, speed them up, paralyze them, poison them, maybe even knock them backwards. The difference is that in Shiren, positioning is really important, like a board game like chess. In many ways, roguelikes like Shiren truly carry on the tradition of pen and paper RPGs, because in a battle, positioning is so important and you have such a wide variety of meaningful actions to choose from. In most games that are called RPGs these days, there isn't really a lot of decision making that goes on in a battle, and positioning is very unimportant. You might be able to decide whether a character is in the front or in the back. Now, positioning is important in so-called strategy RPGs like Super Robot Tyson, Devil Survivor, or Fire Emblem Advanced Wars. But I still don't get the same sense of liberation because the range of verbs is so limited. By the end of Fire Emblem Awakening, I was honestly a little bit bored because there aren't really a lot of different things you can do to the enemies. Just find different ways to attack them, basically. I did keep playing to the end because the writing and character development was above average for games, which isn't saying a lot. But for the most part, it's just not as satisfying as a roguelike because there are so many different things you can do in Shiren. Another important quality of giving a game a sense of liberation and autonomy is to make sure that the verbs are able to combine into compound verbs. The act of paralyzing an enemy and then switching with it so that it blocks the access of the other monsters to a particular room is an important technique that emerges from a sort of a compound verb you get from combining two of the different verbs in the game. I already said the postpone staff combined with the knockback staff or switching staff is incredibly powerful in this game because it enables you to get through almost every opponent. And Shiren rewards creativity with the verbs. One of the fastest ways to level up early in the game is not to just grind, but to be smart about it, to intentionally let one of these dead soldiers level up a rice changer, then throw a rice ball at the leveled up rice changer. I was kind of hoping that would happen, but or you blinded the dead soldier and the rice changer, so we're just gonna kill them. If you really want to kill a dead soldier or dead veteran, they are undead, of course, so you can throw a medicinal herb or a restorative herb at them. But I like to leave them alive, just because there is that opportunity to get a lot of experience. Later on we'll discover an easier way to level up enemies, but for now, dead soldiers are the way. In Shiren for the Wii, when one of your companions is killed, the game is over. So that transforms the entire game into some kind of horrible escort mission where you're always incredibly nervous about your companions doing something dumb, which leads to you turning on all of the options in the game that let you take direct control over your companions whenever there's the slightest bit of danger, which turns out to be extremely tedious. In this game, luckily, when your companions die, they just die. You can still continue playing the game, but because the monsters have killed your companion, they will level up. So in the later floors, companions actually turn out to be more of a hindrance than a benefit. But here in these early floors, Oryu is just going to mop up all of these enemies. She is incredibly powerful, especially with that blinding ability. It's usually fine just to leave her on her own. Catchy too. Pex can get himself into trouble, and anytime you're on a floor with spiky bombs or enemies that can go into the wall, like pumpkin muppets, then you usually have to keep a little more careful eye on them. The depth and the combinability of the verbs in Shiren can be easily illustrated with a lot of different items, but the best one might be the doppelganger staff. Because there's kind of a progression when you use that staff. When you first use it, you think, oh, that's cool. I turn an enemy into a double that's confused, so I can just defeat it now really easily and I won't have to worry about any of its special abilities. Then, the next step is usually that you realize, oh, the other enemies are trying to attack the doppelganger, they're ignoring me. So I can make one of the enemies a doppelganger, and then just attack the other enemies while they're distracted, and then save the doppelganger for the very end. Then you run up against the limitation of the doppelganger staff. One of the enemies actually kills the doppelganger and levels up. And you think, oh, this is a little bit dangerous. Next time I use the doppelganger staff, I'm going to make sure I pick the most resilient enemy. Usually it's one of those giant enemy crabs or a rhinodillo, something that can take a lot of punishment. That way I'll have more time to kill all the other enemies before the doppelganger gets killed. As I said, we're going to have to unlock the melding jar in order to unlock one of the bonus dungeons, so every time we come by, we'll talk to Gaibara again. Hey Gaibara, I know a guy who's super into jars. You guys would really hit it off. Oh, blood, sweat, and tears. The unbreakable jar just bounces away like rubber. Gaibara is of course the stereotype of the tortured artist, but I actually had a friend in middle school who was just like this guy. Oh, Gaibara's learning from his mistakes, giving you a hint that that's what you have to do in the game as well. My friend, every time he finished a drawing in art class, he would just get so angry because the distance was great between his imagination and what he actually was capable of. And he would like rip it up and throw it away and say how horrible it was. And some of them were pretty good. But I always think of him when I talk to Gaibara. The next step in the doppelganger learning process is to realize that you can doppelgang the enemy that killed the first doppelganger and make an even more powerful doppelganger. The next step after understanding that you can use the doppelganger staff on a resilient enemy is to use it in combination with another staff. And as soon as you realize that you can combine the staffs for a much greater effect, then suddenly the game really opens up. So, for example, you could use the doppelganger staff to level up an enemy a couple times, then use the staff of sloth to kill that enemy for a lot of experience. In one of my most memorable Monster House escapes, I was pretty deep in Ravine of the Dead, and there's an enemy, a powered up field bandit, in that dungeon that can throw a weed at you and transform your equipped sword or shield into a weed. It's called a Trove Bandit. I hate it so much, so very much. But anyway, a Trove Bandit had transformed my shield and my backup shield into weeds, so I had no shield. Came into a monster house surrounded by enemies that could kill me in probably 1 or 2 turns. And I did have a doppelganger staff, but there were tanks on the floor. So I used the staff of paralysis, paralyzed the tank so it wouldn't kill the doppelganger. Used the doppelganger staff on a powerful enemy. But then I realized I wouldn't have time to get to the stairs before the other enemies killed the doppelganger and leveled up. And I don't think I had any more charges on the doppelganger. So what did I do? I threw an Herb of Victory at the doppelganger, which makes whatever you hit with the herb invincible for 10 turns, which is kind of an unorthodox move. But because of that, the doppelganger was invincible for 10 turns, and it was just distracting all the monsters, giving me just enough time to get to the stairs. I ended up actually completing that run with no shield, which was pretty insane. But a game that gives you a true sense of liberation rather than empowerment not only has a large variety of verbs, those verbs also complement and build on each other so that you can build some kind of a compound verb and increase your ability. Oh, speaking of monster houses, here we go. Or you up. You just got pimp slapped by a mage. Let's see here. This is not looking good. Or you already up. Skull Mage just killed Oryu and leveled up to a Skull Wizard. We got range enemies, we got roid kitties, spiky bombs. This monster house is not pretty. I think my best chance will be either getting teleported by the skull mage. Maybe roid kitty will throw me to one of the enemies close to the exit. Or I might be able to detonate one of these spiky bombs. Let's see. Luckily there's a skull mage over there hitting me. I think if I can just stay alive long enough. This is not looking good though. I do have a switching staff. I can switch with the skull mage. I don't want roid kitties to block my way out though. Hey! I got teleported away. I gotta hurry up and pick something up before those guys come over here. Yeah, this is good enough. Oh yeah, can't touch me now. I'm gonna taunt them by doing a spinny dance. I need to avenge or use death though. That skull wizard cannot be allowed to survive. Need a nerve of sight so I don't get surprised by some pitfall before I can exact my revenge. This shop, they got a lot of floor space, but their selection, just lousy. It's not really a surprise that I'm their only customer. Well, while I prepare for my mission of vengeance, I'll conclude my liberation empowerment speech by explaining why I don't really like a lot of the open world games that are out there that are fairly popular. Games like Grand Theft Auto or Skyrim, they're very large in scope. You know, you have a huge area to explore, and some of the exploration is genuinely dangerous, so not quite as dangerous as Shiren, but certainly there is danger. Some of those games even have a lot of verbs. There's a lot of different things you can do, but the verbs feel very disconnected. It almost feels like a collection of mini games. Wait, there he is, the skull wizard that killed Oyu. My name is Shiren the Wanderer. You killed my girlfriend. Sort of. More of an acquaintance, really. But anyway, you pimp slapped her to death. Prepare to die. Possibly in an explosion. Wait, I guess he's already dead. What's it called when you kill something that's undead? Prepare to be re-unkilled. Yoga Flame! That one was for you, or you. Wherever you are. Oh, I feel so empty inside now. Maybe blowing up this spiky bomb will help ease my pain. Alright, looks like I'm just about done with this monster house. But yeah, the verbs in most popular open world games don't really seem to build on each other in the way they do in a roguelike. And I mean, I haven't played a lot of recent games. You might have noted from the somewhat dated examples I use, I haven't really been gaming in like a decade. So maybe games are super awesome and I just don't know about them. But all the games I play just aren't as satisfying and liberating as Shiren. The writing generally in games is just horrible, especially when compared to books and movies. And most games seem to stress the idea of empowerment over the feel of liberation. I mean, if you throw me into a QuickTime event at the end of a boss battle that shows me some epic cutscene of me ripping the head off of the boss and screaming in triumph, that doesn't really give me a sense of liberation. It gives me a sense that I'm doing the same thing that everyone else is doing. And it's just a glorified cutscene. I just got a crescent arm that'll do extra damage to explodey enemies like tanks and spike bombs, which can be kind of a double-edged sword, literally, when you're used to doing a certain amount of damage to spike bombs and suddenly they start blowing up on you. But yeah, getting back to cutscenes in games, if you think about the three qualities I've gone over for good control, it really explains why I can't stand cutscenes and QuickTime events. Meaningful feedback, there's really not much meaningful feedback as far as the actual controls in a cutscene. Appropriate control scale, you've been going through the game at a relatively fine area or fine position on the control scale spectrum. and suddenly in a cutscene you're thrown all the way to infinity, or in the case of a QuickTime event, almost to infinity. It's just jarring and unpleasant, and it's gaming's strength as a medium is not in having a story dictated to you in some kind of crude aping of cinema. The strength of gaming is the fact that you get to create and tell your own story, and roguelikes really exemplify this quality. And finally, when we think about being liberating as opposed to empowering, cutscenes are the opposite of liberating. They're taking control away from you, taking verbs away from you, and in some cases they're even frustrating because they show you actions, they show you verbs in the cutscene that you don't have access to in the regular game, and they look really fun. It's like, wow, look at all the cool things the character's doing. Well, you can't really do those in the game though. All that said, I can appreciate an occasional short comic cutscene. And there we have the 3 qualities of good control. A game with good control gives you consistent, satisfying feedback to your common actions. It places you in the appropriate point on the control scale spectrum, which in my case is fine control. And it gives you a sense of liberation rather than empowerment. We will talk about the 3rd reason people play video games and probably do a few more puzzles next time on Shiren the Wanderer. They call him Gaibara. I don't want to deceive you. If you talk to him, he's not easy to please. He's only going to take your jar, then break your jar, then make you jars, then break those jars.
You the flame!